Welcome back to the Titans of Foodservice Podcast. I know I say this every episode, but thank you for joining me here on another episode. This one was a home run. I had the chance to speak with Steve Sweeney, who is the president and CEO of Chartwells, and talk about just a lot of nuggets that I learned through this conversation, especially around taking risks and the daily life of a CEO in a multi-$100 million organization. Truly inspirational to hear Steve's story. And I'm excited for you to hear what he has to say as well. So let's not waste any time and let's go ahead and welcome Steve. So Steve, welcome to the Titans of Foodservice Podcast. I'm so excited to have you on here today. Thank you for taking time out of your day to chat with me.
Well, thanks, Nick. Thanks for reaching out. It's my pleasure.
Of course. So what I usually like to do on these episodes with the guests is I usually like to start from the very beginning. So how did you get into the food service industry?
Okay. Well, I'm going to take you way, way back. I've been very blessed in life that I always knew what I wanted to do. My dad's family was in the restaurant hotel business, and they had several restaurants and hotels in a resort area, Hampton, New Hampshire. And my folks said, why don't you go and spend a weekend with your aunt and uncle? So I did that. And I was maybe 6 at the time, very young kid. And I said, how could anything be better than this? You go to the beach during the day and you work in a restaurant at night and people are having a blast and they're having cocktails and dinner. So fast forward to 15, 16 years old, and your folks say to you, okay, what would you like to be when you grow up? So, I pondered it, and this restaurant hotel thing stuck in the back of my mind. I said, I want to become a chef. So I went to culinary school, restaurant hotel degree, got out, and I worked in a place called Brando's, which is basically a steakhouse, one of the, brass and fern places of the day. While I was working there, someone from the school I went to reached out and said, why don't you come and work with a company called Servamation in Boston? Now, back then it was called Institutional Food Service. It needed a whole marketing redo, institutional. So I didn't want to have anything to do with institutional.
Right.
Went into it absolutely kicking and screaming. So I said, what I'll do is I'll keep my night job in the restaurant and I will go days and work at this particular location with Servamation. I was there maybe 6 months. They put me in a management training program. Then they said, how would you like to spend a weekend in New York? Again, fabulous, glamorous. I'm in. Go open up SUNY College at Purchase. So I went and I drove down the Merritt Parkway, got off in Westchester County, and it was absolute paradise. So I went for a weekend and I stayed for 50 years, which was, fantastic. So I started at SUNY College at Purchase, started off as a chef, worked my way into management, spent 5 years there. Then I went to work for Flick International, for Rudy Flick, and I spent almost 20 years with Flick International. Flick became part of Compass Group. Then I went over to Compass Group. And at the time, they were looking for someone to run their education division. So I said, why not? I always had my hand up in the air. Anytime somebody said, you want to volunteer for something, I did it. So I raised my hand, went to Chartwells. I said, I'll give myself a year. That's it. I'm just going to, I'll give it a whirl for a year. And these were early days. So I give myself a year. That lasted 20 years as CEO, board member of Compass Group, an officer of the company. And I loved every minute of it. It was all fantastic, the whole journey.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
When you were going to school, it sounded like you're going to culinary school and to get your degree in hospitality management.
Right.
Did you feel you wanted to be a chef, or did you want to be on the managerial side of things to start?
I really wanted to be a chef. I mean, that was my first love,
Yeah.
um, and it still is. I mean, I love to cook. I love the whole action of the kitchen. But early days, I looked around me and I saw a lot of people who were, once they hit 50, 60 years old, if they're, on the bakery side and they're carrying 100-pound sacks of flour, or you're in the kitchen. I mean, you need something that's going to last you a lifetime. And
Sure.
back then, you were working all the nights, all the weekends. Just the physical strain on your body was
Right.
tough. So I just said, let me try the management thing. And I had some great mentors. I mean, I was surrounded by great people, and the rest is history. But I did really, the culinary piece gave me the experience that I needed, later in life in terms of knowing my way around a kitchen.
Sure.
So
Sure. That makes sense. My business, we're a food service brokerage company here in the West. So we're in California,
okay.
Nevada, and Hawaii. My dad and I, we started our company back 8 years ago in 2015. And it's been a very rewarding journey that he and I have been on together. And we built a nice little business for ourselves. I'm curious, what was it like working with your family back? I know you said you started when you were 6 years old.
Yeah, well, I didn't spend a lot of time working with my particular family, but I can't speak
Gotcha.
to that because I worked with Flick, which was a family business.
Sure.
So Rudy and Julie Flick, who started the company, um, and it's an interesting dynamic, as you know, working in a family business.
Yeah.
Everybody tends to have their own departments, but then everybody has a say so in what everybody else does.
Hmm.
So I always felt like family. I believe that the family businesses are very strong businesses, especially when everybody gets along, because you know the personalities, you know what you can expect out of people. But it does take a special person to work with, siblings, spouses, aunts, uncles. I was smart enough to not do it within my own family. I did it in somebody.
Well, that's smart. That's smart. What
Yeah.
were some of the things at the time for Flick International? What was their business model? What were you working on? What did your day-to-day life look like?
Sure. Flick started out really in the education business.
Okay.
Rudy, was born in Europe, came to America. His wife went to restaurant hotel school at Cornell. Perfect match. And he saw an opportunity at Sarah Lawrence College, which was their first account. He went over, and so I would say the first 5 years or so was pretty much education, but they're mostly known now for private K-12 schools and for corporate dining, and that's nationally. And they also do a lot of airport services. So if you go into an airport lounge, it's one of the high-end lounges. It's probably Flick Food. So there was an evolution over time that it went from education to corporate dining, and the corporate dining piece was really, when I was there, I call it the frothy days, because this was back when all the law firms, the big accounting firms, they couldn't spend enough money.
Sure.
They had it, and they knew how to spend it, and they knew how to enjoy it, and it was a great time. That'll never happen again, but it was the frothy late '70s and '80s when you could go into a dining room and the best of China, the best of food. It was absolute, you know a chef's dream or a food service manager's dream, because there was no budget.
Hmm.
And if you didn't spend enough money, then the quality wasn't there. But those days are long gone.
Yeah.
um, but they've evolved over time, and they've done a great job in terms of adapting themselves as a company and getting into airport services, and sticking to their base with their K-12 clients, the private school market.
Sure.
But most of their business is public. It's business and industry, private university, private K-12,
Right.
and I have to say, working for them, um, they were great mentors. Both Rudy and Julie Flick were really. I mean, that's the school I really went to, was the school of Rudy and Julie Flick, and they brought along a tremendous amount of people in the organization. I mean, their senior management team, for the most part, have all done very, very well over time.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you learned from working or going to Rudy and Julie Flick University?
um, Quality of food, quality of ingredients,
Sure.
being accessible, being Johnny on the spot. It's the hospitality industry. People want to see management. They want you to be out there. Good client contact. I think being charming while you're doing all of this.
Sure.
And I think doing it on a different level. I mean, separating yourself from the pack. And they always had a quality product, and they were always quality people, and they always did things on the up and up. Work ethic, an incredible work ethic. Um, and I think that they attracted great people, and they brought along the great people. I mean, they really were fantastic in that regard.
Sure.
Julie has since passed. Rudy is still around and doing very, very well. So I stay in touch with them, and that's the beauty of the business too, is that staying in touch with a lot of these people that you knew over the years. But they brought along several presidents and vice presidents that are in the industry today and have done very well.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you first started there, what was the competitive set like, or were they the only ones really doing what they were doing?
There were a lot of smaller regional companies similar
Okay.
to Flick. So there was corporate dining, there was gourmet, there was a long list of smaller companies that through the 80s and 90s were getting swallowed up by the larger companies. Hence, Flick became part of Compass Group.
Right.
And they were all entrepreneurial people for the most part. But the thing that I believe Rudy and Julie brought to the table was that they stuck with it. A lot of people got in, made their money, were for sale, sold it, and had took their money and ran. They didn't do that,
Right.
and they always and I will say that they took care of their people, because a lot of these other companies, let's face it, the food service industry. There's really not a tremendous amount of assets if you own a company. It's a file cabinet filled with contracts, and it is your relationships and your people. I mean, that's your company.
It's
And I
true.
think, yeah, and one thing that Flick did is they made sure that people were taken care of, their clients were taken care of. And I think some of the other folks, what they did was that they sold the company. Those companies got folded into the other corporations, trying to get into the corporate culture, and it wasn't a good mix in some cases, and hence clients were saying, "Hey, I want out of here." But Flick never did that. They had great account retention. They built a great business, and we're all a product of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you first started at Flick to when you concluded at Flick, what was kind of your starting role, and then where did you make it up to?
Okay, so in '96, Flick was purchased by Compass Group, and there was a period there where a lot of acquisitions were happening. So Flick was purchased by Compass Group. At this about the same time, maybe a year or so later, they purchased a company called DACA, Dining and Kitchen Administration.
Okay.
It was a $365 million company headquartered in Danvers, Massachusetts. And they had done a number of different things, but predominantly what was left and what Compass purchased was the food service portion. So I was still at Flick. DACA gets purchased. The CEO of DACA went out to lunch, had a heart attack, and dropped dead.
Wow.
Yeah. So I got a call from the CEO of Compass Group, and he said, "Would you like to go run DACA?" Now, at the time, I was traveling for business. I was in Virginia in a hotel room. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I put myself on the next plane. Again, never passed up the opportunity. Flew right into Boston, and I moved, right in. And at the time, DACA was doing education, but they also had some corporate dining. So at the end of the day, I had a grieving company. I became the president of DECA, and I had to basically break up the company, for lack of better words, and put it into the different compartments that were part of Compass Group. So the corporate dining piece went to corporate, vending went to vending, and so forth. But the largest chunk was education. So out of the 365 million that was core DECA, 265 of that was education, which became the seed organization for Chartwells. Then we folded in some of the other stuff, and that was really the birth of Chartwells back in 1996. So the stint with DECA was about a year or so, and another great organization. But Compass's their philosophy was, they'd have a brand for each sector of the organization, and if they might even have two or three. But DECA didn't really have, I think, the identity in any one particular sector. They did all kinds of things. So I was there to break it up, but I stayed on, and I was, then most of it came over to Chartwells, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, jumping in, getting a call at 2 a.m. and getting on the first flight out to Boston, and you're taking over a company doing 365 million. What was the feelings around that? What was that experience like?
I gave myself, it was interesting because DECA had purchased Servamation, American Food Service, Service Master, 5 or 6 different companies they purchased just prior to their president passing away. So I would go to an account, and I would still see Service America uniforms on people, and so I mean there was a lot of movement at the time, which was also very interesting because the people that hired me at Servamation all of a sudden were part of the DECA organization and ultimately reported to me. They were all very nice to me, especially when I was the CEO. But it was exciting times because there was always a challenge. There was always something new. There was, and I think we right-sized the organization. There were some instances where, you get sort of a day or two of feeling like, wow, this is just, you got this big boardroom and you've got this huge office and you've got all this staff. Then you look in the mirror and you say, I got to manage this thing, and do we really need all of this? So, in short order, you figure out, what, we've got to take care of our employees, we've got to take care of our customers, and here's, how we got to do that. And there were great people in that organization. I have to say, they all, stuck with me and, became part of Chartwells and pressed on. But the first couple of days, or the first, few months was kind of scary. One thing I did do is when I got there, I said, we're going to take Alan's office. Alan was the president who passed away. We're going to, just make it, you want to come in, sit down. I didn't move in, and I gave everybody a chance to breathe a little bit because they were sizing me up too. I was sizing them up, it was that kind of a thing. And, we all figured each other out and it all worked out.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people listening to this podcast, I think it's a dream, right? To manage and be in charge of that large of an operation, but it's got to be scary too. I mean, you can go get the fanciest business degree out there, but who really teaches you the daily rigors and challenges of managing a business that large?
Right. You get in and you do it and you manage it. But like I said, I had great people. There were some really, really fantastic vice presidents. And I knew my way around operations. I was the type of person that once I took over the company, I got out in the field. I mean, I was accessible. I traveled. I mean, I was constantly at accounts or having meetings, and because they want to know who you are and what you're about, and shouldn't be such a mystery. It is the hospitality business. So, that's
Sure.
how I spent my first couple of years. I was on the road constantly.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I mean, you look back now, I mean, there's some road stories. I get reminded by emails from people that were part of the organization, sending me um, letters that I would send out after a visit and say, remember when you sent me this caustic letter after you came for a visit? That kind of thing.
Sure.
So it's a lot of fun. It was all good and a lot of fun.
So going from Deka into Chartwells, and it sounds like you were the main guy over at Chartwells as well,
Yeah.
the CEO.
Right.
I can only imagine that is Chartwells was 365, somewhere around there, if not greater than what Deka was doing.
Right. So day one at Chartwells, remember back in the conversation we had, it was 365, but 100 came off. Compass then added another 100. So we started off at 365.
Yeah.
And, it really, the model is, stay close to your clients, listen to your clients, make sure your employees all feel good about going to work every day. So early days, it was a national company. I mean, that was the thing. I mean, 365 million spread over the 50 or the 48 contiguous United States.
Mm-hmm.
The States is big, as we know, and you spread that out. There are territories that we were a little lean. So early days, we had to build the business. It was either grow as quickly as we possibly can, take the world by storm, and grow our way out of some of the smaller headaches that we had, because we had territories where we probably didn't have a vice president, but we needed a vice president, but we needed the growth in those areas. So growth was the way out to, become a national company while
Sure.
dealing with cultures. A year before there were, American Food Service, Service Master, Deka. There was even some Flick thrown in, some Canteen. They were all part of different cultures. And the way to fix that in the hospitality, these are hospitality people. You get out, you go on the road, you meet with them. We had every summer when school was closed, we just did nothing but go to summer meetings, get in front of our students and client base and in front of our associates, and grew the company very, very quickly, as quickly as we could. And back then, there were really only two companies. There was Marriott, who was doing college food service, and Aramark, and some regionals, pockets of regionals. But on the national scene, there was, we were the third player sort of overnight, which helped us with our success, I would say, because there were really only two national players. And then all of a sudden you get a third one on the scene.
Yeah.
And that, I think that helped our model as well. There was another choice.
What was it like going through such rapid growth?
It was fun.
Yeah.
Growth is fun.
Yeah.
Growth is fun. It was exciting, and there were eager people wanting to join up. The whole lot of it was just fun. It really was. There was some scary times. There's no question. When you're growing quickly and you're adding people and you're moving people around. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing we brought to the table was we had job security for people, especially when you have all these companies that become part of one. How do you make them feel comfortable? People want to know, okay, am I going to have a job at the end of the year? Am I going to be able to, is this my career? Am I going to be here for 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And after the first few months, we got everybody in a room, all the senior management. It must have been 100 senior managers. And we just said, if you're in this room, you're in. We're pressing forward. You're part of the organization, and we're going to make this all happen. But, people have to be secure in their positions, feel good about the company. And that was probably the biggest thing that we did, where there was so much uncertainty for so long. You got a CEO running this larger part of the organization who's now dead. You got this new guy in me who, trying to size me up, which was
Yep.
kind of interesting. Um, and then you got Compass Group, which is, they came over from the UK with a slightly English accent. I mean, there's a lot of change in a short period. Yeah, make them feel comfortable, and we pressed on and got it done.
Sure. When you were growing the company, was there any significant setbacks that you had to overcome?
Hmm. Um, there's always going to be little setbacks, and I think, but my sense is they were always industry setbacks. For example, in some years you'd have food costs would go up by 5%, and most of your contracts, which are tied to municipalities or universities, a lot of them are public universities, can't walk in and say, okay, by the way, I'd like to have 5% more, for my board rates for next year. So,
Sure.
but it was an industry-wide situation. Um, so I would say in terms of, issues, they were, how do we overcome something industry-wide? And our view was always to try to grow our way out of it. Um, Anytime there was a situation, I can't really say that there was anything, labor shortages. It's the same music that's being played now. You see it, if you turn on any channel in the news, trying to find good people, food cost, inflation, all of those things. Those noises in the background have been played forever. And it's a matter of how do you overcome them? How do you have the relationships with your clients? How do you get your people to do the most for you? And so on. But at the end of the day, people, your associates and your clients want, an organization who's healthy and can withstand the bumps. There have been, I mean, I can tell you, not every contract you get right. Sometimes that just, on the odd occasion, you get a client who will say, well, we have 10,000 students. You're going to feed 10,000 students. And then all of a sudden, day one, you got 4,000 students. Well, what happened? Well, there's
Yes.
some that are part-time, but, you work it out. You work it
I've
out.
always been curious. What is when you go to the operator level, to the school or to the corporate campus, what is the value proposition that you would bring to them that would make them want to be a part?
Sure. There's a difference between public and private, first of all.
Okay.
There's a lot of similarities, which I'll touch on, but the public arena, everything has to be, open to the sunshine laws. Everybody wants to see what's going on. They have a full exposure, in terms of contracts. Private universities or private schools, or for that matter, private industry, can do a little bit more and has a bit more flexibility because they're not in the public eye. But it's evolved over time. I would say, 40 years ago, it was we want good food. Now it's food. Quality food is a given. It's that way everywhere in the food service industry. I'm sure your other guests will tell you the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Quality is a given. So you walk in and, what does the proposition look like? Okay, your food's going to be good. Essentially, it comes down to what kind of service are you going to provide and at what price is it going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the big thing is technology, which is an accelerator these days, helps you get it to students and guests faster. So quality's a given. Give it to me as quickly as possible. And through technology and through whatever other vehicles you can, um, make it as reasonable as possible. And everybody's under a bit of a budget constraint, but that's nothing new.
Sure.
That's old news. Um, I'd say quality is like I said, is a given, and the biggest thing is, what are you going to do for me? There are a fair amount of similarities in the industry. Everybody wants a brand set. So, whether it's our company providing a Starbucks or, the opposition providing a everybody does a Starbucks. Everybody does, all the brands. But what is your catering going to look like? Are you going to be, full hours of operation? What is your technology like? And at the end of the day, it's also what kind of people you're going to provide.
Yeah,
They want to
definitely.
know who, that part of the business has not changed. They want to meet their manager and know who's going to be running their facility. It's one thing, corporate's got to be doing what corporate does, but most clients want to know, okay, who am I going to deal with day to day? It's nice to meet you, Mr. CEO, but who's the guy who's going to really run this thing
That's
for
right.
me? Who's that person?
So true. How many? I'm just curious. How many employees were at the company at this when you were there?
Oh God, all in 35,000. But there were
Thirty-five
some.
thousand.
So I'm saying, I would say, hesitation in my voice a bit is because we had some contracts where we managed the associates, but they were on the university's payroll. In other words, we managed them, but they stayed on because the industry as it is, there's a fair amount of self-ops that are out there, mostly in most of K-12 is self-op. Higher ed is maybe 35% or so, depending on where you are. Actually, on the West Coast, it's much more self-op than on the East Coast. But in order to entice a self-op to come over to a contract management company, usually the sticking point is the associates. How are you going to treat my people? So a way around that is keep them on the university's payroll. We'll manage them. A lot of times they do come over. I mean, in the case of Texas A&M, which was a huge contract.
I'm sure.
I mean, that's like that's feeding a city, stadium and all. Um, you know, uh, but all those associates came over. So yeah, it was a big number. Yeah.
Of all the people that work there, why you? How were you able to get to the CEO level? Because that's an incredible feat. What was it about yourself that you possessed that other people maybe not had that you did?
Um, I think I believe it was Pierre Trudeau said, in terms of luck, it's opportunity meets persistence and preparation. So if you prepare, an opportunity is there, and I think in my case that was it. I mean, I always took. I can name jobs that I took over the years. People that didn't want to work weekends. I said, I'm in. I'll do the weekends. I volunteered for whatever it was. Oh, I'm not going to go. Run that district. It's too painful. I'm in. I always loved a good crisis. I didn't invite the crisis, but if I had a crisis, throw me in the middle of it. I'm okay. I'm good. Um, and I thrived on it. And, I tend to be the voice of calm, I thought. Um, but there's a lot of factors. And I had some great mentors.
Yeah.
I was surrounded by great people. Um, there are a lot of things, but in terms of me getting the position, there's certainly a lot of people that are qualified to do it. There's no question. But I, was in the right place. But I prepared myself. And then the next thing, and you just have to do it. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got all these people counting on you. I mean, my biggest fear, I think, all those years was not being able to provide those people with a paycheck. That was my
Yeah.
biggest, So growth was important because at the end of the day, it comes down, all things, put everything aside. People want a paycheck. They got to provide for their families, and that weighed heavily upon me. And then you just do it. You just get it
Yeah.
done. You just figure out a way to get it done.
Yeah. You mentioned having mentors. What was some of the things maybe that stick out to you that you learned through others?
Um, how to take risk, and that's probably the biggest thing, probably in the CEO school, is how to take risk and
Okay.
live with it and come out the other side. I'd also want to mention that, in that vein, there were some fabulous mentors at Compass Group. Mike Bailey, who was there for a long time, Gary Green, who is still there and is, fantastic guy, and, taught me a lot, particularly in, how to get things done and to just press on with it. And I think their style was make a decision, get it done, and if you make a mistake, we'll talk about it. And that became my style too. It wasn't, we're going to chop your head off. Um, People have to make a decision. They got to press on, and we're all in it together, and we'll figure it out. Um, but risk was probably the biggest thing that I learned. I mean, the rest of it, the back of the house stuff, easy,
Yeah.
a lot of fun. What's not to like about that? Even the front of the house, the customer facing stuff, but the business part of it and taking the risk and figuring out how do you accommodate that risk and at the end of the day give shareholder value. That's the tricky one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you somebody where you make decisions quickly? Like, I guess the question would be, how would you assess the risk?
I make decisions quickly to answer that question.
Yeah.
People who cannot make a decision, it just makes me a bit bananas,
Yeah.
and you just have to weigh it all out in your head, and it's just sometimes becomes instinctive. You don't think about it a lot. You just, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to press on. I would say, having said that, my style was a little bit of a benevolent dictator, in terms of, I would make a decision and it was like, okay. But I mean, I always listened to other people, did all that sort of thing as well. However, and I think people began to trust me after a while. It's like, okay, he's been a food service director on a college campus. I could walk on and say, this is what this needs, da, 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 and they're, oh, he's right. I mean, you could tell when people are, looking at you and saying you're right, or, they're saying you're full of it.
Sure.
So, but I was very quick, that to me, make a decision quickly, live with the end result. And, if you ponder it, you're going to waste a lot of time.
Yeah. Were you, at that time, were you more of a visionary or were you more of an execution guy? Which one was more of your sweet spot?
Execution. I'm an
Execution.
operator at heart. I'm an operator at heart.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that.
I'm an operator. Yeah. No, really, I'm an operator at heart, admittedly. Yeah.
Sure. No,
I
I can sympathize with that for sure.
yeah. Yeah. I love the logistics and how's it all going to happen. As I mentioned before, if there's a crisis or something, throw me in there. I'll figure out how to get it done. I just love that operator, how to figure it out, and then getting the outcome. And wow, that's a win.
Yeah, definitely. I feel that in my own business. My dad is a little bit more of a visionary, and I'm more of the execution, kind of roll my sleeves up and just get it done kind of guy. Sometimes I get probably too into the weeds, um, but in terms of when I want to achieve something, kind of like yourself, I'll show up. I'll be there early, and I just won't stop. I won't quit until I get what I
Right.
want.
Right.
If you could go back in time to the very beginning of your journey here in food service, would you have done anything differently?
Probably twofold.
Okay.
On a personal level, I probably would have taken more time for myself. But that's, you know, you make choices, and I'm happy with what I did and everything. But for decades, I wouldn't take a vacation, or I worked, and I loved it. I loved what I did, and so. But looking back, I probably would have been a richer, mentally, more diverse and just a bit more rounded, shall we say, had I done a bit more traveling time to myself. I mean, believe me, I've traveled, but it's all business, Yeah.
Yes.
Going the La Quinta walk up in, San Marcos, Texas with the crickets. I mean, I've done I've done plenty of that. um, and then, so, on a personal side, that would be my thing, is to just take a little bit
Yeah.
more time for myself. And then on the business side, um, I don't have too many regrets there, but um, I always question, could I have done more in terms of more risk? I like that challenge, but I could have pushed myself maybe a little bit more in certain areas. Um, and because risk, at the end of the day, the person who takes the most risk makes the most money, right?
Right.
Usually, I mean, people say, well, Jeff Bezos and you know anybody who's all these names of people, the multi-billionaires, they took the risk,
Yeah.
and you only hear those names. You don't hear about the other couple thousand that fail trying to do the same thing, that are working for the rest of their lives trying to pay back all the money they lost. But the
Yes.
biggest risk, yeah, Elon Musk, I mean, look what he did, a huge risk. So I look at that, reflecting on some of these people, say, not that I'm in that league, but they took, tremendous risk. And maybe I could have pushed the risk piece of business a bit more, only because I think demographics were in our favor, you know, students going to college, students, education. I mean, the education market is a great market to be in.
Sure.
Universities and schools don't move. They don't close. Unlike, some of the sports arenas, business and industry, hospitals, they close, they move, they come under new leadership. Think about education. It's always there. It's just always going to be there, and they don't move.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
yeah. I mean, it's a great steady business. It has other challenges, but it's great steady business.
Yeah. Around around risk, I've got kind of a personal question. I started in 2015 with my dad. We started our business. I had never held a full-time job prior to that. I came right out of college. 6 days later, he's like, let's just start this. And I was like, okay, here I am 8 years later. And it's been a great run. But I think one of the things, and it comes around maybe my level of experience, but it's around, I guess, around taking risk, having a scarcity mindset. What advice would you give to somebody who has a scarcity mindset, sees where they want to go, understands maybe the risk that they need to take, but just kind of getting over that hump of saying, yes, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be all in. Because spending your own money it can be scary. What if you to run out? Similar to your fears of ensuring people have a job and then the company doesn't go under. Things like that.
So find somebody else with a lot of money or an investor, but that's probably not the answer you want to hear,
Yeah.
because that comes with a lot of there's always strings attached. But
Right.
I I would say, you know, as someone who's gone through that journey a bit, you just got to get used to it, and sometimes you just got to hold your nose, and maybe in your personal situation is you just haven't had you weren't forced, um, you need to force yourself, or somebody's got to force you. In my personal case, I didn't have much of a choice. It was like either do or die. You're either going to do this, you're either going to take the risk, and a lot of times, or it could be anything. You want to win a big contract, you've got to be able to take the bigger risk.
Sure.
Or if it's you take the job at Dacre, which led to Chartwells. It's like, in that hotel room, am I going to sit there? Well, let me think about it. Give me a week. No, no. This is a once in a lifetime. I'm in. I'm there. And then you get there and wow, I got to do this. So maybe you just throw yourself in, and you're either going to sink or swim. And if you sink, you're going to learn because, you know, a lot of times you're just a combination of all your mistakes fixed. And
Sure.
you got to make a few. And maybe sometimes failure is more painful than glory is in terms of pleasure and feeling good. You know, it's like you're afraid of failure more than you are wanting success.
Right.
So get used to failure. I guess get used to failure.
Yeah.
Maybe might be the ultimate answer.
I love it.
Don't get comfortable with risk. Get comfortable with failure, and then you'll do the risk.
Yeah, good point. And Steve, what are you up to current day?
Well, after I retired after 20 years with Compass, I did some consulting for them, which was great. And then COVID hit, and COVID's changed a lot of things.
Oh yeah.
And it's changed the industry a lot. So I have been doing some, little consulting bits here and there. But the big thing is, adjusting to retired life is, when you have a big corporate life and you're always on the road and you're surrounded by people. So what do I do now? I mean, I'm doing things that I thought, I always knew I would have to do them, but I'm trying to get used to them. So it's like, okay, I have to register a car. How does that work? It's like, it's a whole new thing. You got to go register, because I had cars, but, the fleet department registered the car. You want food, you got to go to the grocery store. How does that work? So it's learning how to live, which was always. Yeah. Now, don't make myself out to be any big deal, but I made that decision in terms of 20 years is a long time as a CEO, but it was all fabulous. It was really all fabulous, and I think a lot of people were surprised when I said, I think it's time. And I had a great team I left behind and great successor and everything. And but I made that decision that I wanted to give myself plenty of time so that I could, later in life, be able to do a lot of this stuff myself. And hey, I'm pretty handy, that sort of thing. But some of the day-to-day stuff is, but I've done some things with, I've joined all the historical society, I live in an area that's big into nature and all these preserves, and I do on all that stuff, doing all that. But I've learned that I like to be in charge, and if I'm not in charge, I'm really not great sitting on a committee. If I have to open my kimono, and truth be told, I do not want to sit on it. Either put me in charge, or I am not going to sit there and listen to a bunch of people in town talk about, well, I think we should do this at the preserve, and we should do that, and we should buy this acreage. Oh, God, can't do it.
Can't do it. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Well, Steve, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time to come on to the podcast and share your story. I really enjoyed it. And what I usually say to the guests is, when I started in the food service industry with my dad, he said, this is a business where there's no books you can read to be successful. You just got to get out there and do it, and you'll learn and make mistakes along the way. So last year when I started this podcast, I was like, this is going to be my version of a book, a food service book. And it's going to be interviewing people who have been successful in this industry that we all love so much. So thank you for being open and sharing your story. I know it's going to resonate with a lot of people. So thank you.
My pleasure.